All right, everyone, let's get started. My name is Gloria Schultz. I'm the Senior Communications Associate at Making Sense International. I am pleased to welcome you to our new research, Understanding the Impacts of COVID-19 on Youth Serving Nonprofit and Social Enterprises session. This is hosted with our friends over at Deloitte. Even if you want to join a different session, please stay here. This is going to be an incredible session. I promise you're going to love it. I'll be acting as your room facilitator for today. Now with that, let me turn it over to our wonderful session presenters over at Deloitte, and I hope all of you enjoy this wonderful presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gloria, and thank you to GYEO for letting us be here this morning. Just wanted to say thank you again to all of you for joining. We're really excited for this session. My name is Hannah Gable. I'm a consultant with Deloitte Consulting based here in Washington, D.C. And we're so excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about some of the research that we did this summer on how COVID-19 has impacted nonprofits and social enterprises from their mission all the way down to their operations and programs. So a little bit more about me. I've been with Deloitte Consulting for 4 years. I work mostly with large US federal agencies on data analytics and user experience design projects. I'm a part of the Deloitte D2 International Social Impact Fellowship that we have here. And through that have had the opportunity to travel to Cambodia and Chile to work with nonprofits there. So that is how I've gotten involved in this research now. And before we get started, I'd love to hand it over quickly to Peter Liu, a managing director with Deloitte Consulting, to say a quick hello, and then we will get into the research.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and good morning, everyone from the Washington, D.C. area. As Hannah mentioned, I'm a managing director at Deloitte, but more importantly, for the last 7 years, one of the best things I've gotten to do is to co-sponsor the D2I program, which is a pro bono consulting program that provides free services to dozens of nonprofits and social enterprises around the world, like the ones you'll see featured in today's recorded panel. It's great to be back at the GYEO Summit this year. Very different, obviously, as we do this all virtually over video conference, something we're all getting used to, I'm sure, at this point. But I'm always so inspired to see the great work that you all are doing around the world to make a brighter future for the youth. But just as COVID has affected this summit, this year it's impacted all of us. It's impacted all of you, the nonprofit sector globally, and none of us have ever encountered anything quite like the events of 2020. So by the time we reached about April of this year, it was very clear that there would be massive implications for our nonprofit partners around the world. And by a couple months after that, it became very clear that those implications would be long lasting. That inspired us to reach out to our nonprofit partners and to undertake this special study on the impact of COVID on the sector in the hopes that everyone would benefit from this information and learn how to not only navigate these challenging times, but find ways to thrive in them. Combined with some other research we are doing around Deloitte on this topic, I think what you'll see is a story that's emerged around the even greater importance and role of these organizations during these tough times. I think you'll find there's a lot of inspiring stories, silver linings, and wonderful lessons learned that came out of these interviews. But I will stress that we've seen how hard the COVID crisis has been on the nonprofit sector, and our findings are in no way downplaying or ignoring those challenges. But hopefully you get something out of this session and we can help your organization through these times with that information. I do want to thank Hannah, Shana, and Megan, who are on the line as well, and the rest of the D2I team for great work that you all have done. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Hannah, to go over some of the findings in our panel.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. And Shannon, we can jump to the next slide here, but just to give a little bit of background on how we approach this research, as Peter mentioned, we reached out to our nonprofit partners through the D2I program. We heard from 11 organizations through a survey and then also in some follow-up conversations. So obviously kind of a small group, but we hope this gives kind of a snapshot of how nonprofits are experiencing COVID-19. And as you can see in the map here on the right, we did hear from a pretty diverse set of perspectives from a geographic standpoint. And then within that also heard from all the way the executive level, all the way down to project directors and operations staff. So we feel confident that the folks that we heard from, it does kind of represent an interesting and comprehensive set of viewpoints on how COVID has impacted these organizations. So we can jump to the next slide, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about our findings here because we have a pre-recorded panel discussion that we recorded on Monday that gets a little bit deeper into these, but just at a high level, kind of what we uncovered in our research, we asked organizations some questions about how COVID has impacted their mission, the way they're delivering their programs and interacting with their customers, and then also how their employees are experiencing the organizational changes, which for most of them are in a virtual environment. So within mission, we heard from many organizations, they felt like COVID and the pandemic really reaffirmed the work that they're doing and the services that they're providing. A lot of organizations noted that they kind of filled the role or filled some gaps where government or other actors in society may have failed to support certain populations. And then from a programmatic standpoint, and this is definitely similar to what we saw in kind of commercial industries and across other industries, of course, is that COVID was in many ways, kind of a forcing mechanism for shifting things digitally. So maybe pre-COVID, the organizations had some priorities or initiatives to move services into a virtual environment. And COVID was really a pushing mechanism to do that overnight in most cases. Most organizations expressed excitement around that and being able to, now with this virtual platform, being able to reach a much larger geographic population. Of course, the flip side to that, and many of the leaders that we spoke to noted this, that there is, of course, a concern in as these services expand, who are the individuals or populations that are potentially left behind that may not have the same kind of technological infrastructure or digital literacy to access those services as they might have been able to do in person. And then finally, with employee experience, and I think this was definitely one of the more surprising takeaways through our research, we heard from 83% of our survey respondents that they were interested in continuing to work remotely after the pandemic. So after things are safe to return to their work environments. So this was particularly interesting, I think, because in that same survey, we heard from, I think, over 50% of respondents that most of their work pre-COVID was in the field or in person in some capacity. So the fact that they are interested in continuing to do their work virtually, I think, is a testament to the success that a lot of these organizations have seen in moving a lot of their programs into virtual environments. So overall, I think definitely kind of a positive outlook for a lot of these organizations, as Peter mentioned. And as you'll hear in this panel discussion, of course, there's still a lot of challenges related to particularly funding and the transition to new technology tools, but it was definitely hopeful to hear that a lot of individuals found silver linings through this experience. So we can jump to the next slide, and I will just do a quick introduction of our panelists, and they'll do a little bit of a lengthier intro in our panel discussion, but I had the privilege of speaking to these three phenomenal nonprofit leaders on Monday evening. They are from different places in the world, so different time zones, which is why we pre-recorded this discussion, but you will have the opportunity to hear from Susan Place-Everhart, the CEO of Sabre Education, from Dr. Andrew Catford, the CEO of Hagar International, and Catalina Escobar, the founder and president of Fundación Juanfe. So in this conversation, we discuss some of these challenges, the way they've been innovative, kind of how they're thinking about the future. Please excuse some of the tech issues that we had. Of course, that's to be expected in this new Zoom world that we live in. But please feel free to use the chat if you have any questions that come up throughout the discussion. And then we will have some time at the end to answer any questions that you have. We actually have Susan on the phone with us today, so she'll be able to speak to you all after we play this recording. But I think we're all set if you want to play, and we'll just check the audio. So before we get started with our questions, I just would love to give each panelist an opportunity to quickly introduce yourself, along with the organization that you support. So why don't we start with Catalina?
Well, Wafe Foundation started 20 years ago in Cartagena, Colombia. Cartagena is located at the northern Caribbean part of Colombia, 1 million inhabitants. It started because my second son, Juan Felipe, fell from an 8th floor. He was 1.5 years old. He died, and I was pretty much committed to work with the poor people of Cartagena. The first thing we did was focused on infant mortality rate. Cartagena used to have the highest infant mortality rate in Colombia and the third in Latin America. By the first 8 years of operation, we lowered it by 81%. I'm pretty going fast forward, but a lot of things had happened, and we saved the lives of more of 4,900 children, babies, and attended more than 210,000 patients, and took out from malnutrition more than 22,000 little babies. So, and right now we're basically focused on teen pregnancy of teenage mothers in extreme poverty in a model called 360 degrees, which is an economic model. It's based on an economic agenda, if you can put it that way. We're now in Cartagena, in Medellin, in Chile, and in Panama. I love my people. I'm very much in love with the poor 20 years ago. And when you fall in love with these people, it's something that you will take this until the day you die. So this is what I do for a living and my life purpose. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Susan, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Catalina. Great to see you as well, Andrew, today. I'm Susan Place Everhart. I'm the CEO of Sabre Education. I'm the new CEO of Sabre, just joining the organization in July, but I've been passionate about education, about children, for many, many years, and I'm thrilled to be now leading this wonderful organization. We're based in Ghana and the UK, and I'm speaking to you here today from London. Sabre Education's vision is to help all children succeed by giving them the best possible early education. And early years education, in this case, means 4 and 5 year olds, the pre-primary, pre-elementary school children. That critical years education is recognized as a very important driver of long-term educational attainment for children and economic prosperity in a lifelong sense, not only in Ghana, but across Africa and globally. And investment in kindergarten education is a very, very smart investment. And that's a message that Sabre is bringing. We work in direct partnership with the Ghanaian government to develop and improve the quality of early years education. So getting away from rote-based 40 children in a classroom just sitting in chairs and listening to teachers, moving to a play-based curriculum that's fun, engaging. And we work with teachers. We do a lot of teacher training to help teachers deliver that new play-based curriculum. And we're teaching literacy, numeracy, and creative arts through activities, games, and songs. And children are excited to be coming to school. So this is our approach, and we're now entering a period of significant growth for us and scaling our model, not only nationally in Ghana, but beyond Ghana to other countries in Africa. So really pleased to be with all of you here today. Thank you.
And I think I'm last. So hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Catford, the Global CEO of Hagar International. So Hagar International is a non-for-profit organisation free and heal communities in Asia from the trauma of human trafficking, modern slavery and abuse. We started in Cambodia 26 years ago by our founder, who really was just taken by the huge need that existed in Cambodia after the Pol Pot genocide. And then over that time, we've expanded into Vietnam, Afghanistan, Myanmar, and Singapore. And we have a network of fundraising offices globally. And why we focus on these issues is the fact that there's unfortunately 40.3 million people in the world affected by slavery, and about 70% of them are in Asia Pacific. And there's also 25 million people who are affected by human trafficking, and even much more who experience gender-based violence or abuse. So unfortunately, there's much more work for an agency like Hagar to do. However, the good news is over the 26 years of our operation, we've successfully freed and healed tens of thousands of people. Actually, last year alone, we successfully worked with 43,000 women and children, which we were really proud about. And now we have an ambitious strategy to ramp that up to impact 150,000 women and children between 2020 and 2022. And we're very excited about that. And we're already on track to achieve that objective, which is really great.
Wow, awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew, Susan, and Catalina. It's, I think, very clear that the missions of your three organizations have been impactful and are an especially important role and mission right now with the pandemic. So we're excited to talk about how COVID has impacted the way that you're delivering your programs and interacting with the populations that you serve. So I'd love to hear from the three of you about the ways that that you feel like your organization has been challenged the most through this pandemic. So we can start with you, Andrew.
No worries. Thanks, Hannah. So one of the things we noticed off the bat as soon as the pandemic occurred was the hit on our fundraising, unfortunately. And I think many non-for-profits found that. We noticed that nearly immediately when the pandemic became an issue, that some of our donors unfortunately had to pivot and change their funding priorities. For instance, the Australian government within the first month in Australia decided that they need to put some of their key projects on hold. We, for instance, have a chain of hairdressers in Australia who fund our work. And as you can imagine, as restrictions occurred in Australia, they couldn't do the fundraising campaign they'd planned through their salon network. So suddenly we were hit with a lot of our funding sort of being on hold or even disappearing. And of course, a lot of our face-to-face events were affected as well. You know, we do things like golf tournaments and gala dinners, and a lot of these things just haven't been possible for the last 7 months within this COVID period. So what we had to do is get a bit creative on some solutions and do things differently. And I think this has been really great for us. So some of the things we've started doing is, instead of doing face-to-face talks with donors, we've of course been using Zoom, and we've actually invited some of our survivors to come and tell their story. And that's given the ability for people sitting in their lounge room to actually interact with our survivors and hear their stories and ask questions, rather than having to go all the way and visit our field countries. So that's been really wonderful. Also, we have an annual fun run, which is usually in Cambodia, our founding country. Not possible this year. So we've actually had everyone doing that remotely, wherever they live around the world, and then updating their results on a Strava app, so that they can be recorded and do the fun run virtually. So lots of innovative solutions, but I think sort of overall what's happened as part of this for us in terms of fundraising is having a network of offices doing fundraising around the world. We found before COVID, they often work quite independently, doing their own campaigns a little bit differently at a different time. But with COVID, because it was a truly global challenge, you know, it actually encouraged or even forced us to work better together as a team. So through the pandemic, we've been able to really sort of crack working together as a global team and doing our fundraising campaigns as a team. And that's really brought us, you know, the best of our ideas together in what we're producing now. It's of course made us more efficient because we can use those resources from the different countries, and really the results have been much improved. So that's been a really interesting transition for us.
Go ahead, Susan.
Sure, I'll jump in. Thank you. Well, there are a number, as I'm sure there are for really organizations around the globe, not only the funding challenges, as Andrew has mentioned. Something that I'll mention really on the programmatic side, and just the remote or virtual nature of what we've all been going through. So, for example, we are educators and schools have been closed. So first and foremost, in Ghana, schools closed on the 16th of March, and they're still closed, actually. They don't anticipate starting at the elementary school, primary, or kindergarten levels until at least January of 2021. And we do anticipate it is January, but that's a long time to be out of school for children. So that put a halt to all of our traditional programmatic activities. So what to do? And we had to pivot very quickly to what we will do next. And usually we're delivering training face-to-face, working with teachers, working with head teachers, government officials. We're going into schools, monitoring the activities, how well the teachers are doing in the classroom. All of that had to shift. And suddenly children are at home with their parents, and parents have become the teachers, and the home has become the school. So we've had to pivot in many ways to deliver virtual programs through very low tech solutions. And perhaps later in the program, I'll go into some of the details of the radio programming that we've done. But in essence, we've pivoted to delivering our programs through the radio, through what we call the Compass system, which are public broadcasts. Often villages in Ghana might have a broadcast system in a marketplace or on a pole where children can gather and listen to the public broadcasts. And we've been delivering children's stories and activities through that medium. So real switch and change, not only in how we deliver, but to whom we're delivering. And again, a real challenge for us is our staff are education experts and kindergarten and classroom experts, but they're not radio experts. They're not virtual delivery experts. And suddenly, to have that pivot is a real challenge. And we've worked very hard to work with some radio consultants and bring in people who could really support us to deliver what we do best, but in this very different way. And so some real challenges. And not all of our staff had internet and all the technology that they needed to do this. For example, we might have internet access, of course, in our offices where they might have been based before, but now they've gone home to their home villages to be with their families during this COVID lockdown period. So we had to pivot quickly to provide laptops or more data for their mobile phones, or ways so that our staff could continue to do their work. So many challenges, and really requiring creativity on the part of our staff and our entire team. So not unique to us. We know all organizations are really facing this, but those are just some of the ways and some of the challenges that we've been looking at during this period. So Catalina, how about yourself?
Well, they're very similar, by the way. But yes, we faced pretty much three basic problems. Number one, food supply. Our girls live in extreme poverty conditions. Their families mostly don't have an income. So we had to provide them with real food every single day. Number two, technology. Exactly the same problem. And number three, which is the hardest one, most of our girls, well, not most, but a very highly percentage of our girls have tried to commit suicide. They either tried or thought about it. And it is because many of them live with their partners that abuse them, or their fathers or their neighbors. So just thinking about being home 24/7 with an abuser for us became a very high challenge. As for that term, we're still very worried because, as you know, COVID keeps people in hospitals. So these girls have not been able to be hospitalized because the priority are COVID patients. So yes, basically, and as for food, of course, it has been a really big challenge. and our staff, because from March to April, they had to stay home, invest in technology, which they didn't even know. Even though we have amazing staff, we have amazing teachers, they had to stop, learn, and invest. And another thing that happened to us, and I believe in both of your organizations, layouts, unfortunately. About 15% of our staff, we had to say goodbye to them. So that was our main challenges, basically.
Well, thank you all so much. I wanted to shift to a couple questions, which I think we've kind of already touched on in the ways that your organizations have been creative and innovative in shifting the ways that you're delivering your programs and your services or the models of doing business. So we can start with Catalina for this one. Could you speak a little bit more about the ways that Fundación Juan Fe has shown some of that innovative spirit through these last couple of months?
Oh dear, we haven't been so innovative in the past years. Yes, we had to. The good thing about COVID is that we move really, really fast. In 3 weeks, we shifted to the original programs and everything to what become the COVID program. And I'm gonna tell you some of the things we did. Number one, Juan Fe Foundation is very, very important in Colombia, and it's very well known. And we have famous people and influencers. So we got in touch with them so they can enter in Zoom meetings with the girls. Wow. Telling them Shakira, telling them how valuable these girls are. Carlos Vives, J Balvin. Telling the girls, you know what? You're a very valuable girl. And you know what? I also suffer from depression, because I want these people to get in touch with the girls, and they're exactly the same human beings. So these girls are not alone. And I believe that was a key thing we did. Number two, we started basically working more with our staff in webinars and things like that. And myself, let me tell you, I had to learn new things and technological things in order to be in this pandemic and getting to the girls. I started being more in touch with the girls. For them, speaking to Mama Cata, I'm their savior. I'm like a hero. So I would call every girl in pain and say, "Mi amor, I'm here for you. What can I do for you?" And just 15 minutes of being for them, it's a total change. As for these girls as well, we started working with a lot more volunteers. We're very strict with the protocols. Every girl has an habeas data, which means that their curriculum and their medical history, it's very strict. We don't open up to anybody. And I think in the world it is like that. So we were very strict on therapists, psychologists, and we recruited volunteers as psychiatrists. So it's been a lot of help. And plus my staff in the psychological part and my therapist, you know, they rest a little bit more, because it could be a Saturday at 3 a.m. and they will call our therapist. I mean, this is the real world for these girls. The other thing is that we did an amazing campaign of fundraising for food, very successful. So in the first 3 months, we covered the whole year of food. Wow. Yeah, we did it. And we were very happy, because every 15 days, these girls get this like a card. So we filled the card with money, but they can only buy certain products in certain markets. So they don't buy beer exactly. I mean, they will buy first necessity food for themselves and their babies. Depending on their needs, they will buy more, I don't know, milk than diapers, or more, you know what I mean? But we certainly did that. And the last thing and not least, the fundraising. We called every single donor and all of them stayed with us. They said, we know it's going to be a hard year for everybody, but we know you were very good at, how to say that, accountable. We're very much accountable. So our donors are staying with us because we told them, listen, even though you're going to lose money, you're going to stay well, you're going to keep your family, you're going to keep your home, you're going to keep eating. Please be with us. And all of them stayed for this year, at least. we're doing our analysis for next year. It's going to be very different, but at least for this year, we were covered. So thank God. And rediscover our genuine part of creativity, all of us. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And Susan, I'll let you go next. I know you talked a little bit about the radio broadcasting piece before, but would love to hear a little bit more detail around that.
Great, yeah.
Do you want me to jump in, Hannah, on that question in the meantime?
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and we'll wait for Susan here.
Yeah, no worries. No, I think it's a great question about innovation. I think it's that classic sort of saying, isn't it? Every problem creates an opportunity. And I think, COVID certainly had that. A few of the things we found at Hagar, with our main focus on working with survivors and counselling, we used to always do that sort of one-on-one with people, which of course is what we still believe is ultimately the best way to go. But it's been really interesting in COVID because we have so many remote clients in rural areas, getting our skills up on online counselling, and that's been really something I think we will continue beyond the pandemic. And little sort of just small innovations sort of pop up. We have a big network of foster families. We set up the foster care network in Cambodia as a country, and a lot of our survivors' children end up in a foster family rather than an institution, because we're big believers that having children in that family environment's such a great place for kids to grow up in. And we provide a very sort of moderate amount of financial support to those foster families. But with the logistics of Cambodia in the past, providing that sort of financial support to those families used to involve nearly physically sending out checks on motorbike with staff to sort of give the allowance to these families. So we had to master mobile phone money transfers and other technology to enable those sort of things to happen. And the other one, in terms of our staff, look, being a trauma-informed care organisation, we've always had that really strong culture of checking in on our staff. Like a lot of our staff have come from being survivors themselves, and they're working with highly traumatized populations. So we're very conscious to sort of employ all of those techniques with our staff. But what we found with COVID is it wasn't just our staff affected, it was also all our supporters. So we actually packaged up some of our tools and our tips and our materials that we usually use with our staff to deal with trauma themselves and stress. And we actually package them up for our supporters. The tips we use with our clients and our staff could be shared with, the wider public. And we got some really great feedback on that, because I think it was a great way as an NGO to really give back to your donors. It's really a two-way street with donors. It's not just about getting funding. It's also what we can give back. And I think that was a really concrete example of how we could use our technical expertise in sort of dealing with stress and trauma and give something back to our supporters, which was really great. So that was an innovation we'd never really done before, and COVID just allowed that to happen, actually.
Wow. That's fantastic. I didn't know that you had provided that to your supporters, but you are the experts in trauma-informed care, which is a particularly relevant toolkit right now for most. So
I'm going to learn from you, Andrew.
No worries, anytime,
so many
Catalina.
girls coming from the sexual market, unfortunately. We need to have an internal talk.
That's it.
Susan, can you hear us okay now? Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I apologize. My computer crashed. I've never had that happen before. And,
No problem.
sorry it happened in the middle of this. And, but yes, I'm back. So thank you for continuing.
Perfect. We are still talking about the innovation piece. So if you wanted to jump in and finish us off here.
Oh, great. No, I'd love to. Thank you. Yeah, just really so excited by some of the things that we've been doing. As I mentioned, we've been involved with radio broadcasting. So how do we bring stories and education to children when they're at home and with their parents? And their parents aren't trained teachers. In fact, often their parents went through a rote type education themselves. So this play-based approach isn't something the parents know about. Perhaps the families don't have the money for toys, games, and things in the home. So really, we're doing as much as we can to support those parents who are in this very unique and new position for them. So in our radio broadcasts, we've been, as I said, not only doing this through literally the radio, but also through the public address system. And it's stories that are being read. It's sort of read aloud, if you will. And then the children, after listening to the story, are being asked to complete an art project. For example, drawing a picture, making a simple model out of some earth or clay that they have. And some parents or adults in the community, if there's someone there who has a phone, they're being encouraged to take a photo of the artwork that the children have done and send that in to us so that there's this interaction. We've also developed some live in the studio broadcasts that are discussions with parents on, not with the children, but about childhood development, about play-based learning, to support the parents in their new roles that they find themselves in as educators. So we're covering topics in these radio talk shows, if you will, about how children learn best, positive behavior management, ways to put some basic toys and things together with the resources that you might have at home that are local to your community. So these are the ways we're supporting the parents. Also, we've, I think, done a great job, our team has, in reaching out to teachers who are not in school, but teachers who can then reach out to parents by calling the parents of their classroom children, checking on the children's welfare, providing some support. We've also been developing a parent support hotline, if you will, so parents who are having struggles with educating their young children at home can phone in and ask questions from the experts, so to speak. So lots of really innovative things going on. And you know, I think that it so sets us up in a silver lining way to build a lot of this into our curriculum going forward. You know, I think there's so much that we've learned about remote delivery, about engaging with parents directly, whereas mostly with teachers in the past, that's just bringing a larger and new element to the stakeholders in a great early childhood environment. So I think there's a lot that we've learned that we want to just not go back to the way things were, but to go back and bring in some of the learning that we've had and some of these new elements to take forward. So there's certainly been some silver lining. And as Catalina mentioned about donors, I have to say we have also found many of our long-term committed donors to be sticking with us. And I have to say that they've shown their flexibility, their commitment, their passion for our work. And of course it's challenging, and who knows what the next year will bring. And certainly small donors may not have the funds, but we found the foundations that support us have really stuck with us, and for that we're very appreciative. And it's been important for us to be as transparent and open and communicative as possible. And we've really made an effort to do that. And our fundraising team has really been committed in that way. So just to mention those elements as well.
I wanted to shift and now kind of start talking about the future and how you see your organization changing. And Susan, you allude a little bit to this with some of the things that you might continue to carry on even post-COVID. So I guess we can start with you, Susan, to just talk a little bit more about maybe in 2 years when we're back to normal, how, like, what does SABRE look like? What stayed the same? What's changed? How do you see SABRE maybe expanding, or what does that kind of look like from your perspective?
Yeah, no, thanks. It's a great question. You know, in many ways, the timing of this pandemic is such that for SABRE, we were on the cusp of taking our model beyond where we are now and really taking it out into the world. And that is still our intention. You know, for us, we are leaders in the early childhood education space, and there's opportunity for us to take our great teacher training model beyond Ghana and taking it elsewhere. So here we now have this pandemic where we've been forced to do things more virtually than in the face-to-face ways we've done it before. I have to think that there are lessons that we can take in what is our journey towards expanding our reach. And when you look at hybrid learning, when you look at remote ways of delivering teacher training, as we've learned to do through Zoom teacher training or combination of face-to-face. In fact, this next month, we're doing some face-to-face trainings in combination with some video postings ahead of time, virtual sort of hybrid teaching that we didn't do before. And I think that that is going to stand us in good stead when we then are wanting, in any case, to expand our reach and go beyond Ghana with our approaches. So I see 2 years from now, us being in that more expansive mode, having scaled up our work and really bringing our thought leadership to a new audience. And so I think that has to be the vision, that we have to take these lessons from COVID toward what was already our strategic plan, but not going back to the old ways of being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And thank you so much. Catalina, do you want to talk a little bit more about where you see Juanfe in 2 years?
Let me tell you something. In February, we're about to sign a third country, Ecuador, with the mayor of Guayaquil. It's a she, actually. She's amazing.
Wow.
Her name is Cynthia Viteri, and she's a top leader, not only in Ecuador, but also in Latin America. Everybody respects her. And she personally sent me a message and she said, I'm new here and I've been following you for quite a while. And I believe we can change the lives of these teen mothers because it's a pandemic. Teen pregnancy is a pandemic. And let me tell you something, in the United States, you guys have reduced it by 57% in the last 30 years, but it costs still $32 billion to taxpayers. So it's unsustainable. That's why our model is an economic model, because it breaks cycles of poverty, what we do, and it generates local GDP. And she said, and she was very committed, but when the COVID started, one of the cities with the worst numbers of cases was Guayaquil. People were dying in the streets. It was all over the news. So we had to stop. And 2 more regions in Colombia. And we were starting conversations in the eastern part of Mexico, the Riviera Maya. So we're working on it, and we know that's our goal. As for next year, I very much agree with Susan. I think now that we have COVID, I think we're not going to do all classes in our wards. I think we're going to go 60% in our facilities, 40% virtual.
Mm.
It is very important to get our girls in our classes, because the way they work together, the all the things we do, it's very important for them to have them together. But we also saw and understood that in order to reach out, we only need technology. And of course, cell phones that we buy, and we provide the cell phones to the girls. And cell phones in Colombia in the secondary market are very cheap. They're not more than $40. And I'm talking about real good smartphones. So we actually came to realize that it's not so bad having virtual classes. And that way we can bring some other girls and expand our impact. So yeah, the thing is that we're gonna need more money. So it's a lot more work for fundraising. But as for the rest, we believe that's gonna be our future. Expand in other cities, in other countries, as well as in the cities, in our facilities. In Cartagena, we have 148,000 square meter facilities, a green building facility. 850 girls come on daily basis. More than 1,000 people come. Not only the girls, their babies and our staff. In Medellin, they're more like 450 per day. So what I'm saying is that, I mean, the virtual world, it's the now. It's not the future, it's the now. And we need to understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the 60-40 split that you mentioned is interesting, because I imagine, as successful as these virtual services can be, I'm sure it also makes you realize which aspects of your programs and which programs really do depend on that in-person interaction.
And we're gonna make it's not a big investment, but it's in every classroom we're gonna do investment in a good computer, in a good camera, in Wi-Fi. Yeah, we're gonna make an investment, and we actually understood that this is the future, and we got to make that shift.
Yeah, definitely. And congratulations on Ecuador. That's really exciting.
Thumbs up. Let's see what's going to happen next year.
Yeah. Great. Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit more about Hagar and how you see Hagar in 2 years?
Yeah, no worries. So I think very much like Susan and Catalina, it's about continuing those innovations, So for us, it's the, continuing online counselling, and we've also changed a whole lot of our training program to being online. And as I said, some of those technology solutions and the fundraising. So I think there's definitely a whole lot of that which will continue, and I think we'll be a different organisation as a result. But I think the other element, particularly for us, is just responding to this increased demand, as I mentioned before, because this is a huge economic shock. Cambodia, where we work, is tipped to be the most affected country economically by COVID. So all those issues I mentioned about sort of people being unemployed and re-traumatization, and also, people sort of preying on that situation of poverty and things not being settled to actually increase trafficking and slavery. That's going to be our main task, to sort of really ramp up our programming because of the demand. And also, of course, as I mentioned on some of those examples before, the demand's sort of changed. It's not the usual trafficking patterns. There's more internal trafficking. There's sort of trafficking across different borders to different countries, not necessarily the same routes as we've seen before. So we'll be needing to sort of adapt to that changing situation and also upscale our work. So, the good news is we have a lot of skills and expertise from 26 years in this space, but we'll just need to sort of pivot and adapt that, and also increase the scale of that because of the demand that we're already seeing this year, and we know will continue at least into next year and probably beyond.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was fantastic work. Thank you, Hannah, and again to the team, and thank you to our panelists. Now, having seen the recorded video of the panel, we actually have the pleasure of having Susan Everhart, CEO of Sabre Education, with us live today, as Hannah mentioned earlier. So, Susan, in wrap up, thank you for joining us live, by the way, and sharing your story with everyone. it was so great to hear what you learned and how you innovated on this year to thrive in this environment. But with that being said, is there maybe just one more thing you would like to share with this audience?
Thank you, Peter and Hannah. Thank you so much for having me. I'd like to, if I could, first of all, just thank the GYEO for this welcome. And of course, sincere thanks once again to Deloitte and the D2I program for the opportunity to be here today. You know, Sabre was so fortunate to be chosen to participate in Deloitte's extraordinary D2I program. And this team of fantastic young Deloitte consultants has been supporting us to build our capability across many of our areas and our program delivery for several months, and this collaboration has been truly inspirational, and we thank you for that. And some final words I'd like to share with the audience today, given the youth participation, the youth participants in the audience. You know, one is I'd like to say, and I'm sure you hear this often, that you are indeed the future. And it is a cliche, but I think particularly your generation has some unique qualifications to tackle the challenges in this post-COVID world. You know, as you've heard today from the panel, and as you've experienced yourselves in this challenging time, the world is becoming more digital, more quickly than any of us could have imagined. And we all need to work in this new virtual world, or in a world with blended solutions of face-to-face and virtual. This will continue, and there will be opportunities to innovate. And your generation, you're digital from birth. I'm not, you are. And you have such creativity and ideas that I can only imagine. So you're in this unique position, and your opportunities are ready for this quickly changing world post-COVID. So I'd say jump in, use that energy and creativity. And please, we cannot leave behind the most vulnerable in the world as we move to this more digital world. You know, this could be a time that the gap between the rich and poor increases exponentially. Many nonprofits around the world are on the verge of going out of business due to the challenging economic times post-COVID. It could mean that those most vulnerable in the world won't have the support they need to bridge to the new virtual world. You have the opportunity to make sure that doesn't happen. I would like to ask you to please consider using your talents as the digital generation to ensure that those most vulnerable do not lose out in these post-COVID times, but that ways can be found to reach those individuals, particularly in rural areas, and provide more opportunity because of the new virtual reality and not less. So I encourage you in all your efforts, and thank you once again for having me today.
Thank you so much, Susan. Over to you, Hannah, for to close it out. And thank you, Hannah, for your leadership in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan, for those inspiring words. Definitely want to echo those as well. So thank you again for joining us in this panel discussion. And thank you to Andrew and Catalina, who, given their respective time zones, were not able to join today, but really appreciate Sabre Education, Hagar International, and Fundación Juanfe's participation in this, along with the other 8 organizations that we worked with through this research. We will be posting a PDF summary of the research that we did, along with some more information about the organizations that D2I works with. So please check out the GYEO website next week to learn more about that and get some more detail. But just wanted to thank Gloria and GYEO again for having us. This was fantastic, and just really appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Hannah, and the whole team at Deloitte for that incredible presentation. It was so interesting. I hope all of you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.